What's good, ladies and gentlemen? You guys probably thought that this What If was never going to be back, that it was going to be one of those that I just never finished it. But here I am, finally finishing What If Deku was Megumi's reincarnation. This What If was dropped quite a while back with the help of Rogue X, who featured in the beginning of this video. So Rogue, your link's still going to be down below in the description in case you're wondering. And for all of those who have already seen the first part, the stamp card for what time the new part is going to be at is going to be up above. That said though, ladies and gentlemen, for all you new viewers watching this video, if you guys go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit that sub button, like button, seeing as it helps out the channel a ton and it only take you guys 1 second to do. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Yo, what is up? It's your boy Rogue X, and straight off the bat, I'd just like to thank Zether for having me on this collab, being none other than What If Deku was Megumi's reincarnation. Now obviously, I shall just briefly explain the boy Megumi, because, I mean, if you've watched Jujutsu Kaisen, you know who he is. Megumi for Shiguro is actually, well, Megumi Zenin, but, you know, he changed his last name due to his sister, and just not really wanting to be associated with said clan. However, as for Megumi himself, he's quite a calm and calculated person, and is usually willing to, well, sacrifice his life if it means the success or survival of others. And lastly, I shall briefly explain his power. Now obviously he himself is an above average human, you know, he has enhanced strength, you know, enhanced speed, flexibility, reflexes themselves, you know, he actually is pretty much enhanced in every category. Then you gotta stack the cursed energy manipulation on top of that, and then obviously his cursed technique itself, which the 10 shadows technique, if you don't know what it is, to sum it up quickly, he can pretty much not manipulate shadows in a sense, but he can do a lot of things with his shadow, and he can store 10 Shikigami in there. Shikigami are obviously animals that he can summon forth and get to fight for him, but Megumi himself is never turned down an opportunity to fight with his Shikigami instead of, you know, letting them do it for him. He fights with them, which is actually kind of OP. As for what animals he has or Shikigami stored within his shadow, I shall be going over a couple of them briefly throughout, you know, my feature of this What If. However, Zether's going to add in a couple more summonings, you know, just to spice up the 10 shadows technique a little more. Anyway, apart from that, if you guys do go on to enjoy today's video and this collab, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to this channel. Also, once you're done watching this, please consider checking me out. Name's Rogue X. I'll probably be in the link in the description of this video. Maybe, we'll see. But if you're not interested in that, let's just get straight into this What If. Okay, so we're going to start off with none other than Deku's birth. And from here, obviously, Inko and Hisashi are going to give birth to a beautiful baby boy named Izuku Midoriya. However, there's going to be some sort of mutation in his genes just due to the fact that his hair isn't green like Inko's, like, you know, the doctors thought his hair was going to be. However, instead, it's actually going to be a jet black. But let's say for this What If that Hisashi also has jet black hair, so it doesn't really bother him. But I'm also going to have something very sad and tragic here happen. And that's going to be that after Inko gives birth, she is sadly going to pass away. Which means that Hisashi is going to have to raise Deku by himself. And as of right now, Hisashi's job actually wouldn't allow that. So, you know, for the next couple of weeks, Hisashi's going to be, you know, kind of looking for jobs where he can look after Deku and do his job at the same time, you know, get paid and shit. But a lot of things would obviously be bombarding him, not just the death of his wife, but there would be a lot of things, a lot of stress going back and forth, and this would also cause Hisashi to just end up necking it. So, yes, I do mean that in the sense that, you know, he is going to end his own life. I know, dark, very dark, starting to a What If, but this pretty much just means that Deku is going to grow up without parents. Which also means that Deku's going to be plonked straight into an orphanage. Now from here, Deku's pretty much just going to be in the orphanage till he's around the age of 4 to 5, and I'm going to explain why. However, while he's here, obviously Deku's going to grow up, but he's not really going to form a lot of bonds just for the fact that he's kind of calm and collective. He's also shy, but not like really inverted type shy. Like, he'll make friends if they come and talk to him, but he would just kind of keep to himself. Then around this time, Deku's going to start going into school, and this is where he would be introduced to Bakugo. Now, straight off the bat, Bakugo is going to be a pain in the ass. He would manifest his quirk a lot earlier than all the other kids, and it would obviously be his explosions. However, at this time that everybody else is developing a quirk, Deku would also develop one. And when he goes to the doctor about it, the doctor would tell, the orphanage carers, or caretakers, that Deku's quirk is energy manipulation. He has a certain amount of energy within his body, and he can control that. Although he doesn't know specifically how Deku would be able to control that. That's for Deku to find out for himself. So that's exactly what Deku's going to do. For the next couple of months, he's going to learn how to specifically control this, bring it forth, and use it. He would learn how to reinforce his body with cursed energy, which is obviously what he has access to. That's what this energy is, it's cursed energy. He can charge it into his fist, he can, again, reinforce his body, he can move faster with it, he can do a lot of things with it actually. And while Bakugo is watching this, Bakugo would be inspired to become stronger as well, because, everyone's also boosting his ego, so he pretty much thinks he's top shit anyway. But nonetheless, one day Bakugo would gang up on Deku and would say, what, you think you're gonna become a pro hero with something like that? And he would pretty much provoke Deku to the point where Deku would literally run up to him and just punch him in the gut, and that would be it. Bakugo would be out cold, and then Deku would proceed to beat the shit out of Bakugo's lackeys as well. This would actually end up getting Izuku suspended from school. Not expelled, but suspended. Then once Deku gets back to the orphanage, he'd be scolded by the caretakers, but surprisingly there would be someone there to adopt him. And Deku would actually have to end up meeting this dude. Now, I've done this in another one of my what ifs, okay? And this was none other than what if Deku was Baki's reincarnation. Now, I specifically named a martial artist named Saejima, a reference from a Yakuza game. However, I'm going to do the same here because Saejima is a very good name. So I'm going to have a martial artist by the name of Saejima adopt my boy Deku. And I mean, Deku's not really going to refuse either, because he doesn't really want to stay in this orphanage his entire life. Now, more to the point, okay, Deku would head with Saejima, they would end up going to the dojo, and from here, Deku would just ask one main question. So, Mr. Saejima, I believe, why would you even go out of your way to adopt me? Saejima would have a very big smile as he says, you kid, you have a lot of potential. Now, Deku would look very confused as he's thinking, potential? What is this guy going on about? Saejima would then scratch his head as he says, how should I explain it? You possess a type of thing that one of your great ancestors had. And before you ask how I know this, it's because I was actually friends with your dad. Very close friends, actually. And before your dad's dad passed away, he told me something. There will be a kid born with jet black hair, just like my son. If he possesses an energy manipulation ability, then he will manifest something of very, very great power. And if you're still alive by that time, please train him and teach him how to control it. Now, Deku only being like the age of 5 right now would just kind of be like, yo, like, really? Dude, like, what the fuck are you going on about, right? So, I know it might be hard for a 5-year-old to understand that all, but Deku would take it in bit by bit and would be like, yeah, okay, I can kind of see what you're going on about now. And then Saejima would pretty much sum it up. So, for the next who knows how long, we're going to be training, and I'm going to be teaching you how to fight, how to protect yourself, and how to protect others. Now from here I'm going to fast forward or have a time skip to the beginning of the anime, and to pretty much sum up what has happened in the past like 11 years, I'll just put it simply, right? So Deku has obviously trained, he's become a lot stronger in hand-to-hand combat, he's learned how to embed his energy manipulation style into said hand-to-hand combat, and he has also manifested the 10 Shadows technique. And with the manifestation of this, he was also he was also granted 2 Shikigami, being none other than the Divine Dogs. the black divine dog, and the white divine dog. However, to call forth on the divine dogs, he needs to make a specific hand sign to do so. And also, you're probably wondering, yo, how the shit is this man going to gain more Shikigami? And for that, I'm going to have a simple fix. To put simply, right, my boy Deku can think of a summoning to bring forth, right? But once he summons that, if he wants to be able to control said Shikigami, he will need to defeat it in a fight first. So if it's not the divine dogs, right, let's say he wanted to summon Orochi, like that huge snake that he had, he would have to summon forth that, like he would have to imagine Orochi in his head, right, the big snake, and then he would have to proceed to beat it. And then he would gain access to summoning it at will and controlling it. Kinda like how Maharaga is there. Also, if you don't know who Maharaga is, we'll go read the manga. It's quite an important summoning. I'm not really going to explain it, but yeah, there probably will be manga spoilers in this video, just saying. Anyway, usually, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I should just quickly wrap this up, right? Usually in Megumi's case, right, in the Jujutsu Kaisen world, he would have to defeat a curse, you know, specifically like an animal or something, as a Shikigami, to then obviously store it in his shadow and bring it forth. But since, well, there aren't curses in this world, he's obviously going to have to think of said Shikigami, bring it forth, and then battle it. That's kind of what I'm doing here to kind of allow him to gain access to more summonings, if that makes sense. Now, more back to the point, right? I know I said I would quickly try and explain what happened during the time skip or to sum it up, but yeah, he would pretty much manifest the 10 Shadows technique. And this would obviously allow him to gain a lot more power. Now, back to what I was trying to say after, you know, this 11-year time skip. Now, school life, you know, it's going to be pretty average. He's going to get decent grades. And as for any bullies, well, my boy Deku's just going to kick their ass. Because we know that my boy Megumi is quite a delinquent in high school and pretty much beat up all the bullies. Now anyway, obviously there's going to be one day Deku's in class, you know, Bakugo's there, he's being a pain in the ass as usual, and the teacher would ask what they want to do after school, but would then quickly take it back and be like, who am I kidding, yous all want to be heroes, as he throws the paper up into the air, and everyone just goes crazy, you know, showing off their quirks, but Deku's just kind of there thinking, oh, what's wrong with these dickheads? From here, the teacher would proceed to point out that Deku and Bakugo specifically want to go to UA. Now, as for the delinquents and people in class, they're not really going to disagree with the fact that Deku wants to go, considering he is pretty fucking strong. However, as for Bakugo, well, they know that he's just going to get a raging hard on talking about it. And what do you know, literally like 10 seconds later, or not even 10 seconds later, Bakugo would slam his hand against the table as an explosion comes out, and he starts saying, yeah, that's right, I'm gonna go to UA, I'll beat all the mock exams, and all you extras are gonna go be some third rental cop. That made no sense, but you get what I'm trying to say, right? He would just be a fucking prick, just like he was in canon. And then he would go to make his way over to Deku's desk and would go to slam his hand on his desk. However, Deku would grab him by the collar and would slam his head into the table, knocking him out almost instantly. The whole class would go quiet and Deku would apologize for taking action. However, the teacher doesn't really care because he knows himself that Bakugo was not going to shut up. Now, from here we skip to the end of the day. Deku would head home, you know, he'd go under the bridge. And as for Deku's housing situation, well, he actually would have moved out at the age of 16, so quite recently, and he would have got his own apartment. However, he would still every now and then go and visit Saejima to, you know, have a sparring session with him, you know, get stronger, maybe learn some new techniques, you get the gist. But nonetheless, he would take the short route home and would go under the bridge. Now, as he is going there, he would feel something not only watching him, but also lurking behind him. Then, as Deku quickly pivots on a foot and does a 180, he would see this huge sludge monster standing there. This sludge monster would then say, "Ah, kid, I can sense that you're strong. I need to take your body and use it as a vessel." It would then go to surround itself around Deku. However, Deku's first course of action would be to summon his demon dogs. Then, after he summons those two, he would move in and start channeling his hands and feet with cursed energy. From here, he would begin trying to hit the sludge monster, and at first, it would actually seem like it's working. But yeah, that's at first, because the more he hits this sludge monster, well, the more it seems like it's not doing anything. The demon dogs would also be attacking it, you know, clawing at it, trying to eat it even, but again, it just wouldn't be doing anything. The sludge monster would actually be quite pissed at how much Deku's retaliating, so it would smack him into a wall with one hand with pretty much all of its force, and this would make Deku's head rattle as he starts bleeding from his scalp. Then from here he would just think, yeah nah, this is too strong to be left alive. So Deku would clasp his hands in a motion as he says, "Sacred treasure, swing." A strange energy would start emitting from Deku. However, as this happens, All Might would arrive as he says, "I am here." Then he would let off quite a powerful punch that would actually send a huge gust of wind down the tunnel that they're in basically, right? Because overhead is that bridge. But nonetheless, right, this gust of wind would blow the sludge monster to pieces and would cause it to be incapacitated. From here, Deku would see this and would actually be glad because he then passes out due to exerting his limits to their max. And you're probably like, didn't this man train for ages on end and now he's suddenly being beaten by a weak ass sludge monster? But the only reason for that is just due to the fact that it was intangible. But don't worry, soon my boy Deku will find a way to be strong enough to even outshine those who have intangibility. Now, more to the point, All Might would bottle up this sludge monster and would actually carry Deku to a hospital, unlike Canon, right? Except after he drops Deku off, he would actually have to run away due to the fact of the time limit, the one for all form, and this pretty much means that the whole Bakugo accident, that's not going to happen. But, however, in return, when Deku wakes up, he would actually see All Might. And yes, we are talking about buff All Might here. But nonetheless, All Might would actually do this, to actually check up on Deku because he thought maybe the injuries that Deku sustained would actually be kind of bad. But nonetheless, Deku would have recovered pretty fast. And also, as for how long Deku was in the hospital, I'd probably estimate about a day and a half, giving more than enough leeway for All Might to recharge and come back and check up on him. From here, Deku would actually, apologize to All Might for making him take time out of his day to come see him. But All Might's like, nah, I did this on my own accord. I just wanted to see if you were okay. But from here, All Might would actually kind of inspire Deku in a sense to attend UA. But, Deku would be like, well, I was going to apply for it anyway, get in there, beat the mock exam, pass, become one of the top tier students. Well, he wouldn't actually say that, but he would say, oh, I was going to go there anyway. And All Might would be actually surprised, he'd be like, okay, this kid is aware of how strong he is, and he knows what he wants. That's good. Before All Might leaves, he would say, I guess I'll see you at UA, kid, because I believe in you. I think you're strong enough to get in there by yourself. Deku would nod and thank All Might once again for saving him, and All Might would say, well, I'll see you at UA, kid. As he then shrinks down to his Small Might form and actually shocks Deku quite a lot. He would then walk out, and Deku would be wondering what the fuck just happened. After being released, he would dwell on it for a little while and just think, he must have a transformation quirk. Okay. However, I don't think anybody else knows this, so, Deku would keep it quiet. He'd be like, looks like this is a little secret between us, I guess. Now, from here, I'm going to have a time skip, and this is obviously going to be the 10-month time skip. Deku's going to begin training physically, mentally, with his 10 Shadows technique, with his Shikigami, you name it, right? And he's obviously going to be doing this by going to the gym, beating villains at night, so he's actually getting in physical practice, real-time experience, not just training with Saijima and shit like that. He would also gain access to a couple more Shikigami, which I will pretty much explain during the entrance exam. But yeah, pretty much Deku's going to start training and he's going to start working on getting a lot stronger. Now, like I said, after this 10-month time skip, the UA entrance exam is going to begin. And obviously, Deku is going to arrive, right? He's going to sign in, I say sign in, but he's going to register his quirk, and he's going to head straight into the written portion of the exam. As for the meeting with Uraraka, not going to happen because he doesn't fall over. And as for sitting next to Bakugo, he's still going to do that. Just for the fact that, he's not scared of Bakugo, so what the fuck is he going to do? Anyway, more to the point, written exam, y'all don't want to listen to that, so I'm going to just get straight to the mock exam, right? Deku's going to ace the entrance exam, I say entrance exam, but the written exam just due to the fact that he got good grades. He knows what he's on about. So yeah, bro, written exam, he's going to blitz that easily. Then for the mock exam, he would actually start warming up by stretching, getting some stretches in, and getting ready to run, because he knows he's going to have to do a lot of that. Then President Mike would yell as he says, "The gate is open!" As soon as this happens, Deku would try to run past everyone, but he wouldn't be able to do it without hurting anyone. So he would quickly interlock his fingers as he says, "Nue." A bird would then come up from his shadow as it picks him up by the shoulders, and he literally flies over everyone. Then when he's a good distance in front of everyone, Nue would drop him and would go straight back into his shadow. The first robot in front of him would be a 1-pointer. A robot worth 1 point, which he would swiftly deal with by channeling cursed energy through his leg and kicking its head straight off. He would then continue on, and when he takes a left past the next building, he would actually encounter a 3-pointer. Now he was either expecting to encounter another 1-pointer or a 2-pointer, but surprisingly, he got a 3-pointer. Now from here, with one hand, he would form it into the shape of a snake as Orochi, or the giant serpent as they call it in translations or different translation, would leap from his shadow as it wraps itself around the 3-pointer's head and squeezes. The 3-pointer's head would then pop off, and Deku would gain 3 points. Now, after the 3-pointer is defeated, Orochi would quickly return to Deku's shadow, and Deku would proceed to call forth his demon dogs. Now, from here, he would tell them to go and pretty much get rid of the smaller robots, being the 1-pointers, while he himself goes and deals with the bigger robots, referring to the 2-pointers and 3-pointers. And pretty much this is going to go on for, I'd say, a good 5 or 6 minutes, right? Deku's just going to round up a shit ton of points. I'd say it's when he gets to about 60 points that the ground starts rumbling. And as soon as it does, Deku would know that something is up. Something is off here, right? So he would call forth his demon dogs to store them back away, and would call Nue, right? Which would manifest and drag him, or fly him technically, to the top of a building, where Deku would see a huge ass robot emerge. He would then think back to when President Mike was speaking of said robots and said that you should probably just run away from them. So Deku would just be thinking, yeah, that must be the 0-pointer he was talking about. Looks like our job is done here, time for us to go. Deku would then be grabbed by Nue once again, and they would start flying away from the 0-pointer. Or at least that is until Deku hears a scream. None other than a scream of pain from someone, right? So Deku would quickly turn around and see that there is a girl trapped under some rubble. He would also see that she is directly in the path, of the 0-pointer. Deku would quickly lay out a couple plans, right? He can go down there and he can try his best to remove the rubble and then save her by moving her out the way, but by the time he's gotten rid of the rubble, it probably would have already stepped on them. So, the only choice is to destroy the robot. From here, he would command Nue to fly him straight towards the 0-pointer's head as quick as he can, and as he's being zoomed straight towards said 0-pointer, he would be thinking back to some of his training with Saejima. Saejima would have told him about a technique that his his grandfather used, right, with the whole energy manipulation, and it was something that was actually so destructive in terms of attack potency that it was pretty much a forbidden technique. And saying forbidden is kind of an understatement, because this shit could potentially one-shot some of the pro heroes if used correctly. Anyway, while Deku is shot off towards the 0-pointer, he would be suddenly let go by Nue, and he would think, okay, I'll only get one chance at this. Focus. As he focuses everything on getting this right, then he would pretty much do a 1080 spin as he builds up the momentum in his leg, and then kicks it straight towards the 0-pointer's head. Then, at the last possible moment, he would channel cursed energy into his foot, and then kabam! Off goes a very loud bang noise as black and red lightning flash from the attack. As it connects and Deku knows that he's pulled it off, he would say, "Kokusen!" The 0-pointer would actually be moved backwards quite a bit by just this attack, and the reason for this is because of the damage multiplier. Not to mention that it also distorts space, which, in and of itself is quite a destructive move. So yeah, after this black flash lands, the 0-pointer would actually rock a little bit and would end up falling backwards. Then as Deku is falling, he would think, oh shit, I put way too much energy into that attack. I won't have enough to summon Nue. Fuck. Is this the end? As he goes hurtling towards the ground, However, last minute, he would feel a slap reach across his face as he slowly inches closer towards the ground. From here, President Mike would be shocked, and actually so shocked to the point that he would just kind of stand there, mouth agape in just awe, as he forgets to tell everyone that the entrance exam is over. Then as he regains what's happened, he would say, "Oh, everyone, the entrance exam is done. Stop fighting." Then, from here, obviously Recovery Girl would come around, she would heal any of the injured people. And once she reaches Deku, well, Deku wouldn't really be injured of any sort. He would just kind of be a little bit exhausted. And also, on a positive note, Recovery Girl would also hand out some candy. But nonetheless, Deku would quickly recover from this, and I say recover, but he would gain the ability to walk and stand again after, I'd say, half an hour of rest. No, he wouldn't be able to use his 10 Shadows technique or manipulate any of his energy, considering how much he used on that Black Flash, but in the end, he would end up walking home. Now, I'll just fast forward to when he gets the letter from Yue, because nothing else interesting is going to happen from there. Maybe except the occasional workout, getting some push-ups in, some crunches, sit-ups, getting on the grind basically. But nonetheless, the door would ring and he would quickly head to it to receive a letter with the Yue stamp on it. And Deku would be quite excited, so he would head back to the living room and would open it to where a hologram would project none other than All Might himself. Now, as for the speech, he's pretty much going to go along the lines of, "Young Midoriya, today I have something very good to announce to you." And then obviously he would go on and say, "You have a hidden talent. Truly, I'm not saying this because, I'm trying to motivate you. I'm being honest." And then, he would pretty much just say, "You have scored yourself 60 attack points and 60 rescue points." I meant 60 combat points, but I couldn't think of the word. So in total, Deku's going to have 120 points, therefore ranking him at the most amount of points gathered since All Might himself, which is quite an amazing feat. All Might would then end it off with saying, "Welcome to Yue, young Midoriya." Deku would then punch the air as he's flipping around, and he's just kind of hyperactive, something that Deku's usually not. But, he would be very excited, because this is something new, he's like, "I got in, I can now save more people." And so begins the start of Deku's hero career. Anyway, I'd say that's the end of my part of the collab. Again, thank you, my boy Zether, for allowing me to feature on this. You bet your ass I'm going to listen to the rest of this What If, because I know that you're going to kill it, in a good way obviously. And I shall now hand the mic back over to the boy Zether.
Alright. Thank you, Rogue, for handing that mic back over ever so graciously. Nah, totally kidding. But seriously though, boys, now I will be beginning the hero's journey towards Deku's, his road to becoming a hero. That being said, I don't really want to waste your guys' time too much, seeing as, you're probably well invested into the series and you don't need to hear another semi-intro before you get into the story. That being said, we're basically just going to hop back into where Rogue had left off. Okay, so obviously, Rogue had basically left off with Deku essentially making his way home and basically making, his couple of adjustments at his house. He would, of course, have gotten the letter from All Might, and you would be pretty excited because, you just got into a national school. You would expect to be pretty damn excited about that. That being said, Deku would, of course, start getting his stuff ready for the very next day, and this is when Deku would basically proceed to pass out. The very next day, Deku would wake up, and it's at this point that Deku would, Deku would basically proceed to just kind of start walking there. Deku, instead of taking the bus or the train or anything like that, would have honestly kind of been a little low on funds at this point. And Deku would have just been like, I forgot to get my check. As Deku would basically proceed to just kind of be like, alright, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Guess I'm going to have to run there. Deku would basically run to the gates of UA, and he would get there with time to spare. It would be about 10 minutes before class starts, and this is when Deku would start walking in there. Deku would look around as he would ask somebody if they know where this room is, obviously being class 1A, and this is when a boy by the name of Kirishima with red hair would come right behind him, and he's like, "Yo, dude, you're looking for class 1A as well?" Deku would be like, "Yeah, man, I'm just looking for the classroom. It's first day and everything. I don't know where it's at." And Kirishima would be like, "Bro, same. Mind if I tag along?" Deku would be like, "Nah, man, not at all." And it's at this point that they would both basically start heading their way to class. Now, it's at this point that they would kind of be on the outskirts of UA, and it's at this point that, well, Kirishima would let out his very overly enthusiastic as well as manly nature. Anyways, yeah, he would let out his manly nature and all that stuff. Now, this is when he would basically start talking to Deku a lot, and after about like 2 minutes of walking next to Kirishima, Deku would be like, bro, you are kind of getting on my nerves, bro. I'm gonna need you to chill out. And this is when Kirishima would be like, oh, alright, man. This is when he would basically look at him and be like, bro, this school's so manly. As Deku would be like, yeah, bro, for sure. And Kirishima would just continue talking and talking. Deku would look at Kirishima, and in case you haven't noticed, Kirishima is kind of going to fill that Itadori role in the story. That being said, this is when they would both basically finally make it to the door of 1A, and Deku would look at Kirishima as he's just like, well, dude, we're here. I'll be seeing you around. As Kirishima would be like, sure thing, man. As it's at this point that they would basically go inside, and Deku would immediately, upon opening the door, just hear screaming. It's at this point that Deku would notice a yellow bag on the ground, and he would see some movement coming from there. As Deku would just be like, that's strange, I didn't know there was caterpillars in our classroom. As it's at this point that Deku would see Bakugo on top of the desk yelling at Ida, telling him that he's gonna be beating all of you snot-nosed stuck-ups. All of you little rich kids who are privileged and you just got here off of nothing but luck. Yeah, he's gonna be taking all you extras down. Bakugo would continue to talk down on everybody and just call them all extras. And Deku would continue to start chuckling. As it's at this point that Deku would just be like, dude, how are you over here calling people stuck up if this is literally what you're doing? Bakugo would look at Deku and be like, shut up, Deku. As it's at this point that Deku would just start walking towards his desk. However, as he would, Bakugo would throw a kick at Deku, as Deku immediately catches it, and he would hit Bakugo's kneecap right on there, as Bakugo would fall onto the desk and hit his head with a loud bang. Aizawa would kind of smile as he would have ended up noticing that, and this is when he would look at Deku as he's like, Guys, settle down. He would look at Bakugo as he's rubbing his head just like, why you? As he would deactivate Bakugo's quirk, he would look at him and say, if you guys have another one of those little altercations, I'll be expelling both of you on sight. It's at this point that Aizawa would be like, alright, anyways. As it's at this point that Aizawa would be like, they're so weird. I didn't seem to feel as if I erased that other kid's quirk, and he still felt like he had an extremely strong presence around him. Like a very powerful aura. Aizawa would kind of just throw that to the back of his head, as this is when they would basically just all be told to go outside. Obviously, Uraraka would point out the orientation event, and Aizawa would just be like, if you have time to make some orientation ceremonies, then you don't have time to be a hero. If you have all this free time, then you should not be thinking about orientations. You should be thinking about how you're going to make yourself a pro hero in less than 3 years. We don't have all the time in the world, so chop chop, move it. As he would look at the rest of the students, Deku would immediately grab his stuff and he would make his way over to the locker room. As Kirishima would follow behind, they would all basically proceed to get changed, and Kirishima would see Deku's body as he's just like, bro, you're kind of ripped. What do you do? Deku would be like, oh man, I've been training with my dad ever since I could remember. Kirishima would be like, cool, dude, what's his name? Deku would be like, his name's Saejima. And it's at this point that Kirishima would be like, bro, that is such a dope name. He'd be like, so what did you train in? Deku would be like, I trained in some martial arts. He taught me a little bit of everything. And Bakugo would come in out of nowhere and be like, even with all those martial arts skills, you still can't scale up to me. As if to this point that Todoroki would be on the way in the back just putting on his shirt. He'd be like, yeah, he can't scale to you, but he put you on your ass pretty fast. I'm pretty sure he put you there in about 2 seconds flat. As Bakugo would just be like, oh, why you? And it's at this point that Aizawa would walk into the locker room just being like, I hope there's nothing going on in here. He would have immediately realized the tensions were high, and he would go back outside as everybody would meet him there. This is when Deku would basically proceed to be told by Kirishima that what he did in there was pretty manly. Deku would say that he's not trying to be manly, he's just trying to be smarter. And he would then basically explain to him that, he didn't want to start that, but Bakugo initiated it, so he just had to finish it. It's at this point that Bakugo would have heard that, and it would royally piss Bakugo off. It's at this point that basically they would both start grabbing their things and meet Aizawa outside. They would both meet him there, and this is when Deku would basically get the ball thrown at his direction. Deku would catch the ball as he's just like, so what do you want me to do with this? And Aizawa would look at Deku as he's like, I want you to throw that ball as far as you can. And Deku would look at Aizawa as he's just like, so what's the catch here? Like, what is the goal? Aizawa would look at him and be like, for far too long, we've all been pretending as if quirks don't exist. We've all just been having these kids not be able to use their abilities all willy-nilly, but that's the thing of the past. We should have been letting these things be used. That's an outdated point of view. We should let people embrace their gifts and all that stuff. And Deku would be like, yeah, the man has quite a point. As he would basically grab the ball, he would immediately throw it square into the sky. As Deku has a lot of physical strength, however, he's not going to be using no Zapdos, or I guess Nue, right? His name is Nue, the bird thing, right? Nue, yeah. He wouldn't use that. He would quite literally throw it, and he would get a total of 400 points for throwing it as far as he can. See, Megumi, I'd say, nah, that's a little too OP. I'd say 300 meters, right? 300 meters sounds pretty reasonable. He would throw the ball about 300 meters, and everybody would just be shocked, as Bakugo would be up next. He would throw the ball, and he would then be like, huh, beat that, Deku. As Deku would look at Bakugo, he would just kind of just put his hands in his pocket and be like, whatever. As it's to this point that they would basically continue to go on to the rest of the things. The 50-meter dash, Deku would summon Nue, his Shikigami, as he would basically proceed to grab Deku by the shoulders and fly him past the 50-meter dash before Ida's time could even be registered. It's at this point that Deku would then have to take the grip strength, and seeing as Deku could throw the ball 350 meters, he would definitely have just enough strength to shatter the grip strength machine. That being said, they would then have the standing long jump, to which Deku would of course yet again use Nue. And it's at this point that Deku would start doing the repeated side-to-side steps, as he would get a pretty baseline score in that. You know, it's not bad, but it's not great either. And well, after that, they would basically have push-ups, sit-ups, and, you know, just basic stuff that you would usually get in some weird quirk assessment stuff. You know, nothing that you could really use your quirk in. So Deku would basically just have to rely on his physical abilities as for the rest of the portion that he has to basically do things. That being said, this is when they would basically all wrap everything up, and Aizawa would actually see Deku's scores and be quite impressed. Of course, Aizawa would have still told the kids that, you know, one of them was going to get expelled, and this would lead to him basically being like, alright, I was just kidding about the expulsion. I just wanted you guys to try your best, because he sees potential in each and every single one of the students. That being said, this is when the day would get wrapped up, and it's at this point that Deku would go over to grab his stuff and basically start making his way out the door. On his way home, Kirishima would actually end up seeing Deku, and he would end up tagging along with Deku, asking him what those powers of his are. Deku would look at Kirishima and just say that, you know, it's basically just summoning animals. He's like, if I would have put it to you bluntly. Kirishima would be like, oh, that's pretty awesome, but what is it exactly? Deku would sigh. He would just be like, well, my power is cursed energy. It basically allows me to use the 10 Shadows technique, which basically allows me to summon Shikigami. They're creatures from another world that basically allow me to do things that I normally couldn't with my baseline body. And my cursed energy allows me to enhance my physical stats tenfold. As Kirishima would hear this, he'd be like, dude, your quirk is so OP. He would ask Deku what the backlash is, and Deku would say that if he had to say there was one, he would say that it's his energy exertion, because summoning one of these creatures definitely takes a lot out of him, and his Shikigami are very special to him. Kirishima would then look at him and be like, huh, that's pretty interesting, huh? Must be nice to have quite a flashy quirk. As Deku would say, what do you mean? Kirishima would then begin to explain that, you know, in his experience, having a flashier quirk basically really helps you a lot. Deku would be like, dude, you must be insane. Your quirk is crazy powerful. You just need to know how to use it in the right way. There might be a way for you to increase your hardening even more than you already have. Because from what I saw in the quirk assessment, your scores are not half bad. Your physical body in and of itself is actually quite impressive. And if I had to say how strong you are, I'd basically compare you to me. Kirishima, after hearing that, would be like, yeah, I guess you're kind of right. And it's at this point that he would basically look at Deku, as he'd be like, well, this is my stop. See you tomorrow. Deku would look at him, as it's at this point that Deku would basically just be like, yeah, see you tomorrow, man. As it's at this point that Deku would basically proceed to, hold on guys, give me a second. Alright boys, apologies for stopping the video. Somebody just knocked on my door. Anyways, as I was saying, Deku would basically proceed to continue going on home, and this when he would arrive, as he would send a text to Saejima, who was still yet not home. He would tell him that he actually thinks he did quite well for his first day at UA, and he would say that he's quite proud of him. Deku would look at him as you know, metaphorically of course, as he would just be like, yeah, I mean, I guess I crushed it out there. He would basically send him a smiling emoji, and this is when Deku would just kind of unwind, as he would put his stuff away, and this is when Deku would basically pass out for the next day. This is when Deku would basically arrive home, and this is when Deku is basically going to be having about 1 week of normal school situation, seeing as the UA, the Heroes vs Villains event basically isn't really going to be happening for that much time, I guess you could say. Wait, no. The what's it called? The Heroes vs. Villains event is like right around the corner, so I'm not even gonna say that. Okay, obviously, you know, the Heroes. No, yeah, the Heroes vs. Villains, and then the US shit. Yeah. Anyways, this is when, of course, they would basically, you know, have the little thing with the Heroes versus Villains, and obviously, this is when Deku would make it a class. Of course, the entire day of school would basically go as you would really expect. And, well, nothing would really be out of the ordinary up until the final class of the day, which is essentially their hero training class. On this particular day, All Might would bust in through the door saying, "I am here," coming in the room like a normal person, as Deku would look at him and just be like, "Huh, All Might, haven't seen you since the 10-month mark since about like 10 months ago." And All Might would basically proceed to just be like, "If it isn't you. Your name is Izuku Midoriya, am I correct?" Not gonna lie, I completely just lost my train of thought since I had to pause the video real quick since some outside noise was occurring. Anyways, that being said, this one Deku would be like, "Yeah, that's right, the name is Izuku Midoriya." All Might would smile as he would say, "Well, I'm glad you're here." Deku would look at him as it's at this point that All Might would be like, "Well, anyways, class, you guys, as you guys know, you guys only have 3 years to get ready. So, I will be instructing you all on combat training." And this one, he would basically look at them all as he would say, "Well, learn to your right." As all the students would turn to their right side, they would then see a wall kind of open up, as all of their hero costumes would basically start busting out. It's at this point that he would be like, "Well, in my opinion, the clothes make the pro, so why don't you guys get suited up and meet me outside of the training area?" Everybody would get suited up, and of course, I know that you guys know what his hero costume is going to be. Deku was, of course, going to be wearing that Jujutsu Kaisen drip, and Deku would go outside as he would basically look very similar to what you guys see in the thumbnail. That's pretty much what Deku would look like in this version of events. Deku would look like the spitting image of that. Imagine Megumi, but My Hero Academia style is basically what this version of Deku looks like. That being said, Deku would basically go outside, and Bakugo would see Deku as he's like, "Whoa, he kind of looks cool." As he would get that thought out of his mind, he'd be like, no, that's Deku. He couldn't look cool even if he wanted to." This is when Deku would basically just go outside, and Kirishima would actually see Deku's costume. He'd be like, "Dude, that is so manly. The black on black just looks so awesome." Deku would look at him and be like, "Hey man, I appreciate it." As it's at this point that they would both basically fist bump a little bit. As Deku's like, "You know what, you're not half bad." Kirishima would be like, "I'm telling you, man, you just gotta get used to me." As Deku would slowly start taking a small little bit of liking towards Kirishima. This is when All Might would basically announce the teams, and of course, just like in canon, it would be Uraraka and Deku versus Bakugo and Ida. Of course, this is when very basic events would basically go down. Deku would basically use his dogs, his heavenly dogs, to basically track down Bakugo and Ida's location through their sensory abilities and their sniffing, that stuff. Dogs will be dogs. And well, that being said, he would basically summon them as they would immediately track down their location. Deku would look towards Uraraka's direction as he would say, "They're over there. Follow my spirit." As he would basically send the white dog to go with Uraraka, as he would stay with the black demon dog looking one, as he would basically proceed to just walk around. And this is when Deku would start hearing explosions and screaming in the background. He would just hear "Deku!" As it's at this point that Deku would turn towards that direction, he would see Bakugo coming in with a giant explosion. As immediately Deku would see that the explosion is about to hit his dog, Deku would jump in the way and Bakugo would hit that explosion, causing Deku to go flying. Deku would immediately get back up as he would wipe some blood off of his cheek. He would then immediately rush at Bakugo, to which Bakugo would throw an explosion to blind him, creating a smoke screen. Bakugo would then launch another one at Deku, but Deku would dodge, and his dog would actually bite Bakugo's calf on the back. Deku would be like, "Yes," as it's at this point that Deku would start creating some of the hand signs to try to use Black Flash, and right on that instant, Deku's dog would have actually been hit by a full power gauntlet explosion. After getting attacked for about what seems to be about 5 seconds, but an eternity for Bakugo, Bakugo's gauntlet was fully charged and he aimed it straight at his leg. As the entire floor that they're all stepping on, they'd be on like the 3rd floor, keep in mind, would blow up completely. And Bakugo would be sent flying down. However, Deku's Shikigami would end up dying. And he would end up getting royally angry. Deku would immediately just be like, "Did you just?" And Bakugo would be like, I always did hate those little spirits of yours, Deku. Looks like I finally got my revenge. Deku would look at Bakugo and just be like, ah, as he would rush at him. And Deku would then immediately rush towards Bakugo's direction, as it's at this point that Deku would say, how dare you? As it's at this point that Deku would actually end up using one of his summonings, to which he actually ended up discovering during the time that Deku had off. I guess you could say during the time that Deku had after the little entrance exam. See, Deku did have about 3 days, and during those 3 days, after he got home the very next day, when he basically rested, seeing as, you know, the letters did basically take about a week to get there, you know, all that stuff. I mean, wait, no, I'm totally contradicting what we had stated previously. Okay, I'm going to be making a tiny retcon. Remember how I said that the Heroes vs. Villains event was basically right after the first day of school, which was a quirk assessment? Well, scrap that. Instead, it is going to be 1 week after that. And instead of that, they were basically having normal scholastic events. Obviously, during that time, Deku decided that, you know, he was obviously trying to buff himself up. You know, Deku was definitely trying to get stronger. And during that time, Deku would have ended up trying to get a little bit of an OP summoning. However, during that 1 week break, Deku would have actually ended up almost dying, had it not been for the fact that his body was so durable that Deku slightly survived the onslaught of what ended up happening. See, what ended up happening specifically was Deku ended up trying to think of a powerful Shikigami, and what he had on his mind was a great ape. He was thinking of a giant black gorilla, and well, that is basically what he got. Deku ended up summoning a giant ape, think Gorilla Grodd from the DC universe, and Deku, after doing that, would look up at the behemoth as he would just be like, whoa. But immediately, before Deku even got the chance to speak, his mind would just completely be taken over, seeing as it's a telepathic gorilla, just like Grodd, and it would immediately talk to him as he would say, how dare you summon me, boy? You seem to be so weak, there's no way you could handle me. This will be the day of your judgment. He would immediately rush at Deku, grab him by the leg, and pull a Hulk. If you guys have seen Avengers, when the Hulk literally grabbed Loki and just started slamming him from side to side, that's what would happen to Deku. Deku would proceed to get ragdolled so bad, Deku really thought that this day was the day of his death. However, Deku would get so lucky and barely survive. Just barely, like I cannot stress that enough. He barely ended up surviving that. However, after the ape saw that Deku was able to survive that onslaught, he would look at him as he would say, I'm impressed. Your body seems to have incredible amounts of durability. Maybe in due time you shall be a worthy contractor. I will keep you in thought if you so happen to survive this. I will be going now. As immediately it would just fade away, and it's at this point that Deku would just be lying there on the ground, as Saejima would actually go inside and be like, yo, what is going on? Deku would see this and immediately just be like, oh, my bad. And no, Deku wouldn't be like, my bad. Deku would look at him and just be like, and Saejima would just be like, dude, you need to get to a hospital. As immediately he was taken to Recovery Girl. She kissed him and his healing started going up very fast. Deku would be unconscious for about 2 days and would finally wake up rested. As the next couple of days, he basically just ended up recovering. And he kind of did a little worse on the quirk exam, just because, you know, the man was, no, not the quirk exam, but no, yeah, the quirk exam, because the man was completely dying. Anyways, that being said, this is when I am contradicting myself so bad. What I meant to say was the Heroes vs. Villains. Wait, did I mean to say the Heroes vs. I don't know. I am just so lost at this point. Anyways, the point is, Deku ended up summoning himself a giant ape. And in case you're wondering, yo, Zether, where did you get the ape from? I made it up. I just wanted Deku to have the ape, and I wanted to make a reason as to why he had it, when I could have honestly just been like, yep, Deku got it. And you guys couldn't have told me a thing. But instead, I decided to waste like 3 minutes of your guys' life. I do apologize for that. Anyways, that being said, Deku, after seeing, well, one of his heavenly dogs basically die, he would immediately look at him after getting royally pissed off. And Deku would say, Bakugo, you're gonna pay for that. as immediately he would create the hand signs and charge up his cursed energy, as he would proceed to rev up his cursed energy, and he would immediately summon the ape, as he would say, "I see you survived." Immediately he would look towards Bakugo's direction and say, "Is this the one?" As Deku would nod, as he would be on one knee after exerting so much energy just to summon him, as well as the dogs. He even has one. He has two Shikigamis active at once. So yeah, Deku is struggling right now. And it's at this point that the ape would pretty much proceed to nearly kill Bakugo. It would ragdoll him to the point that it happened to Deku, and Bakugo would be unconscious for the next 2 days. All Might would have told Deku to back off, but Deku would have been so angry, he just let the grief and the anger just completely overwhelm him. He let the anger get the best of him, and granted, Deku probably shouldn't have done that. However, Deku was in a bit of a moment, and he was extremely heated. I mean, what did you expect Deku to do? Bakugo pulled a very big DICK move. Like, that is not okay. He killed his literal Shikigami, like that's not cool. But anyways, that being said, Deku would basically go up to the room with Uraraka, as he'd basically be limping, and Deku would proceed to create a 100 IQ play to basically get Uraraka to sneak in the room while Deku distracted Ida, and she would touch the bomb before Ida was able to grab her. Ida was almost about to capture her, however, Deku gave her a slight push, and she ended up barely being able to grab onto the bomb, leading to them winning and catching that fat dub. That being said, this is when Deku would proceed to get yelled at by All Might and, scolded for what happened to Bakugo. Bakugo would get healed up by Recovery Girl, and Kirishima would say that, that kind of wasn't a very manly match. Deku would just stay silent and go home, and after this, Deku would rest up for the very next following day of school, which will be a couple of normal days, since Bakugo needs some time to recover. About 3 days would happen, and this is when they would finally go back, and at this point, it would be, let's say, Thursday, right? Thursday would be the day where the USJ stuff happens. Now, it's at this point that all of them would basically arrive. 13 would give her extremely boring speech of just saying, "Oh yeah, guys, like quirks are extremely powerful. However, they have the potential to be dangerous." Everybody, of course, knowing that, seeing as they're all like 16, 15 at this point, would not really need to hear that. So, I'm just going to skip all that. And it's at this point that I'm just going to go straight over to the action. Immediately, Kurogiri would arrive and say, "I do deeply apologize for inviting ourselves. However, All Might must die." As he would immediately recognize that All Might isn't there, he would basically be like, "Where's All Might?" As it's at this point that Deku would try to summon Nue. However, before he got the chance, Kurogiri would notice that he was trying to do something weird, and he would immediately teleport him out of there. However, right as Deku would almost fall into the water, Nue would catch Deku barely by the shoulders, and he would put him on top of the boat, as Deku would basically look around at his surroundings, and he would see Mineta and Tsuyu jump out of the water immediately. As Deku's like, "Huh? When did you guys get here?" They would all be like, "We're gonna ask the same to you," and Tsuyu would be like, "Ribbit," all that stuff. This is when Deku would look at her and just be like, well, how are we gonna get out of this? He would then look at Tsuyu and be like, "Wait, why did they send you to a water area? They must have known our quirks, didn't they?" As Tsuyu would be like, "Judging from the fact that they sent me here, they probably aren't aware of them." Deku would be like, "Yeah, I thought so." As it's at this point that Deku would basically proceed to be like, "All right, well, I'm gonna get us out of here." As he would say, "Nue, lightning." As immediately Nue would quite literally dive down to the water and just let out all of the volts of electricity that he has. As yeah, the water is a very powerful conductor of electricity, meaning all of the villains, they got folded like a lawn chair. That being said, he would basically proceed to grab the rest of them, and Tsuyu would grab everybody with her tongue, as Nui grabbed Tsuyu, and they would all make it to a very safe distance. It's at this point that Deku would basically land, as he would see that Aizawa is fighting against a bunch of villains. Deku would look at Tsuyu as he would say, "You guys need to get out of here and call for reinforcements. Tell Ida he's the fastest one here." They would say, "What about you?" Deku would say, "Me? I'm gonna go kick some ass." As it's at this point that Deku would rush over with Aizawa, and they would both start tag teaming them. It would be on some Batman and Robin stuff. However, Deku would be Batman, and they would be going crazy. They'd be going ham. It's at this point that Deku would be on his final and last villain, which has a very powerful durability quirk, which lets him tank attacks on a very powerful level. Deku would have been using his most powerful attacks and combining them with some cursed energy, and Deku would basically be having Nui come down and strike it, as as, you know, he ended up taking down another villain. However, as Aizawa saw this, Shigaraki would have also been watching and very angry at this, as he would tell the Nomu to attack that brat. The Nomu would do as it's told, and it's at this point that the Nomu would blitz at Deku. However, right as Deku was about to get punched straight in the ribs, probably rendering him useless for the rest of the event, Aizawa would jump in the way of the attack, getting sent flying off into the distance, and Deku would immediately turn to see the Nomu, as it's at this point that Deku would be like, there's no way. At this point, Deku would get angry seeing that, you know, that happened to Aizawa. And it's at this point that Deku would summon the giant snake. I believe the name that Rogue X gave it was the name Manda. I believe it was Manda. I don't know. Something like that, right? And he basically proceeded to slither over to the Nomu, increase in size, and swallow the Nomu whole. However, within the snake's belly, the Nomu would quite literally tear out of itself, and it would come back out as the Nomu would rush at Deku. And Deku would fall onto one knee, as it's at this point that Deku would be extremely exhausted. Aizawa would lift his head up just barely to activate his ability to turn off quirks, and the Nomu would punch Deku right on the side of his face, but Deku was able to dodge most of the attack. It kind of like scraped Deku's face, I guess you could say. Deku had that attack landed on him and he was sent flying. However, Deku would get up beaten and battered, as Deku would say, guess I have no other choice. He would then start charging up his Black Flash attack. As the Nomu would move so fast towards Deku's direction, the Deku wouldn't have a chance to react, as the Nomu would rush at Deku and punch Deku square in the ribs.
It's been a while since I've done this what if, so I might be a little bit rusty, but let's have a go at it. As soon as Deku sees the Nomu rip out of the snake that he would have used his cursed energy to summon, he would look at it as he would be like, there's no way. And Aizawa would then immediately come in and get sent flying, with Deku just like being completely shocked. Deku, looking at the Nomu, would think to himself what in the world he's gonna do, and thus he attempts to use the ability of Black Flash. But what would pretty much end up happening is, because Aizawa was sent flying back, its shock absorption ability would be able to tank the blow, and so Black Flash would not be able to do a thing to the Nomu. Obviously, it makes the Nomu go back a tad bit due to the force of the impact, but because the Nomu has shock absorption, that was the worst possible opponent to use that move on. And so what ends up happening is the Nomu would just simply screech out, as in a venom-like fashion it would wail its arms around, screech out as its claws would rush at Deku and would slash Deku straight in the face, leaving him like a scar on the side of his cheek, as Deku would be sent flying. And Deku from here would say that he has no other choice, as he, using his cursed energy, would end up summoning one last creature which might be able to defeat the Nomu, summoning the gigantic ape that would end up appearing in front of the Nomu, as it would turn towards the direction of Deku, who it could see is mid-battle, as it would say, so it looks like you did survive, as suddenly it begins to rush in at the Nomu that would pretty much end up attacking at Deku, and it would grab the Nomu by the top of the head and the mouth, as it rips the Nomu's head clean off, and the Nomu from here would fall onto the ground, with the gorilla looking towards Deku and telepathically saying, "Kid, it seems you made the only wise decision and summoned me here. It was a good thing I arrived as I did, as I can sense that your energy was running low." And suddenly, the Nomu would appear right behind the gorilla as it punches at him, and the gorilla would be sent flying back just a bit, as it turns towards the direction of the Nomu and says, "How are you alive?" As Deku says it has shock absorption and regeneration. I think that the main source of healing for it is that brain of its, as the body of the Nomu just stayed on the ground and a new Nomu appeared from where the brain was separated from it. As the gorilla looks towards the direction of it and begins to beat at his chest as it goes, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh," and it would pretty much rush towards the direction of the Nomu, grabbing it once more and pretty much like grabbing its arms as it rips them off of the Nomu's body, and then it grabs the Nomu, ripping it in half from its torso, as he would go on to grab the Nomu's head and just start squeezing as hard as he possibly can until the Nomu's brain would be left as nothing but mush. Deku watching, and Aizawa, who would weakly be able to stare, using his quirk erasure ability to pretty much limp over there and look at the Nomu as this is all happening. noticing that his ability is not having any effect on Deku whatsoever, confirming his earlier suspicions of him not being able to cancel his abilities. Suddenly, Aizawa would then fall to the ground as he would go completely unconscious, and Shigaraki, seeing Deku and Aizawa both very, very low on health, would say, if the Nomu can't do it, I'll have to finish you off. As Shigaraki goes in and tries to grab at Deku, and right as he's about to grab him by the face, Deku lets out "No!" as he weakly tries to throw a punch, and suddenly, in supersonic speeds, All Might would grab the wrist of Shigaraki as he breaks it completely, and from here, Shigaraki looks up as he sees All Might and screeches out in pain as he lets out an "I hate you" as All Might looks at him, and All Might would say, "That's enough, villain," and he would go on to then grab Shigaraki's other arm as Shigaraki would turn to Kurogiri and say, "Kurogiri, get me now," as from here Kurogiri would attempt to save Shigaraki, but Bakugo would come flying in using his explosion quirk to grab Kurogiri and hold him down, leading to both Shigaraki and Kurogiri being taken care of way earlier on than in canon, and Shigaraki would be screaming in agony and pain as he would say, "I hate you, All Might," as he gets dragged away and says that he'll be back with a laugh, as Kurogiri would simply think to himself that Master's not going to be too pleased at this outcome. As from here, all of the students would be given a 1-week break from school, seeing as what just happened was kind of very much so traumatic, and they're all going to definitely be needing some time to just recover and, see how they're feeling, right? Like, they're going to need to have some time to train and recover, and so once they do end up recovering, they return back to school with a 3-day notice that they're going to be entering the UA Sports Festival. With that said, Deku was told that he's going to be having to give a speech, and so Deku would prepare the most awesome, legendary, simple, not very legendary speech of all time. As we skip straight over to the day of the UA Sports Festival, and as soon as Deku was told to go up there by midnight, everybody's eyes would be stoked on Deku, wondering exactly what's going to happen. As Deku turns towards the direction of the crowd and says, "Well, I'm not really much of a talkative person, but I will say one thing. All of us have made it here to UA on our own will and accord. So I say that we all go out there, give it our best, and make these people entertained." As everybody just is like, "Hey, like, I like that." As, people start cheering and they're like, "Yeah, entertain, 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 entertain." And, from here, Deku just walks off the podium to see Bakugo looking at him and saying, "Not bad." As from here, he would make his way towards the racing starting point, and immediately starting the race, Todoroki would immediately smash his foot onto the ground as a bunch of ice is let out, and Deku in a quick fashion would end up summoning oh my god, I forgot. Nue. He would summon Nue, right? Like, when I tell y'all I haven't heard this what if in a minute, like, I'm not playing. But he would summon Nue, right? And from here, Nue would grab onto Deku by the arms as he proceeds to pretty much fly him straight towards the direction of the finish line, as Todoroki tries to shoot geysers of ice at Deku to affect him, but Deku using Nue would just be able to shoot lightning bolts at Todoroki, which would throw him off guard, and simultaneously the 0-pointer would get in the way of Todoroki, almost actually flattening bro, until Todoroki would casually be able to use his ice to create a dome around him, and then bust out of there with his fire as he makes his way towards that and freezes the 0-pointer in place. Suddenly, Deku would finally be arriving towards the area where the mines are at, and seeing as nobody else is in his wake, then he has a smile on his face. Suddenly, Bakugo comes flying in with his explosions far behind Deku as he would scream, "Deku!" trying to get ahead of him, as Deku would easily pass the finish line, and Bakugo comes in second, Todoroki third, and the rest of the leaderboard would go as in canon. Literally everything could not be any different. But following that, we would have the cavalry battle event. Now, the cavalry battle event is interesting because Deku this time is not exactly going to be so much of a target to everybody as he was in canon. And not only that, but Deku's friendship circle is actually a little different. So instead of the team that he had in the original, this time around he's actually going to be having Kirishima with him. He's going to definitely be having Mei Hatsume, and another person who's going to be with him is definitely going to be Tokiyami. Now what would end up happening because of this is Deku would end up deciding that instead of using like shoulder pads to like carry each other and actually be like that, Deku decides to ultimately use his quirk to create a new cursed spirit, which is actually going to be aiding them a lot when it comes to this event. He would create a gigantic elephant, the one that Megumi does actually use in the Jujutsu Kaisen anime, and with that he would be able to pretty much just bulldoze his way through the cavalry battle. Now the cavalry battle event is a very tedious, boring event for me to cover, so let's just say that he wins like second place because Bakugo comes in last minute and snatches it. Todoroki, you know, he ends up getting a bunch of other headbands, so he's fine, and everybody who makes it towards the fighting portion makes it there. So thus we end up seeing ourselves win a battle between Shinso and Deku, who are both just kind of facing off at each other and looking towards one another as they're both kind of thinking to themselves that this is it, like one step closer to becoming pro heroes, with Shinso thinking to himself that he can take this kid out, and with that his place in the hero school will definitely be solidified, with Deku thinking to himself that all he has to do is defeat Shinso, and then he can make it, as you know, as he could make a name for himself and show Saejima that he made the right choice in choosing Deku to adopt, and that he made the right choice in training Deku and, you know, like being hard on him, you know what I mean? And so Deku goes on to pretty much get into the stage as he looks towards Shinso, and without even saying a word, as Shinso starts trying to badmouth Deku just completely zones it out, and he would rush in at Shinso as in one quick motion, Deku would then elbow Shinso straight in the stomach, causing Shinso to get winded, and then in a quick succession fashion, Izuku would do like a kick flip type kick as he would kick Shinso off of the ring, and Shinso would immediately fall onto the grass as all of the air was immediately taken out of him, and Shinso would wonder why Deku didn't say anything back, but Deku simply looks up towards the direction of where the cameras are, and he would like hold out a symbol that Saejima could recognize to know that he was thinking of him. Saejima smiles through the other side of the TV as he thinks that, damn kid, always impressing me. Your grandfather was right, Izuku. As from here, Deku goes over towards the training area where Todoroki doesn't actually end up bothering him and saying, "Are you all my secret love child?" Instead, something else ends up happening, and what pretty much ends up going down is that Todoroki would end up telling Deku that, you know, he's made quite a name for himself out there, but not to get confused that he's going to be the one who wins this whole thing, with Deku saying that that's unlikely, and Todoroki saying that it's the clearest thing that's going to happen. Like, there is nothing that Deku could possibly do to stop Todoroki from winning this and making everybody acknowledge his power. With his ice alone, he's gonna defeat Deku and make sure that the world knows that he doesn't need his fire. With Deku looking towards Todoroki and simply thinking to himself that with that train of thought, it's definitely not going to be him who stands on top, considering that with that and Todoroki not wanting to use his full capabilities, that is going to be his undoing. And so Todoroki walks away with a bit of an angry look on his face as he thinks to himself that Izuku may be right, but he's going to be the one who ultimately is his own undoing, and it's not going to be Izuku, you know what I mean? And so what pretty much ends up happening after that is essentially we get a really strange scene in which like Deku and Todoroki like are walking like to the stadium, right? We have Todoroki like with light coming onto his face, and Deku just walking out to the stadium from a darkly lit area. As Todoroki finally makes it out to the crowd, begins waving around, and everybody starts looking at Todoroki, and they're like, Todoroki, Deku, you know, people start like hyping up different sides, and Deku would finally make it towards the arena. As once there, he proceeds to look towards the direction of Todoroki and say, he can quit now while he can, because as soon as this battle starts, there's not going to be any sort of holding back from the side of Deku, with Todoroki saying, I wouldn't have it any other way. And Deku from here looks towards the direction of Todoroki as he would say, fine then, have it your way. As Izuku goes on to look towards the direction of Todoroki and say, I've been saving this one just for you. I knew that your ice was going to be giving me some problems, so I decided that I would use something that would allow me to stay away from you simultaneously and give you a run from your money at the same time. As Izuku immediately says, knew it, as soon as the proctor would start the battle, and you would hear everybody in the crowd be like, let's go! As Deku from here looks towards the direction of Nue, and he would fly into the air before Todoroki can even shoot an ice geyser at him. Todoroki would then from here think to himself, damn it, he's gonna fight long range. And Izuku would tell Nue to shoot lightning at the direction of Todoroki, which Todoroki would have to put up ice to block, but because the ice is actually water technically, it is able to pretty much, it's a conductor, so Todoroki can't get near the ice that already gets zapped, and he can't put more ice near that ice, or else it's going to end up getting back to him, and that is going to be his undoing. Deku would keep snapping more and more and more and more and more and more and more lightning, and Todoroki can't even like go into the air using his ice, because if he does that, Deku can shoot lightning at the ice, which would shock Todoroki, cause him to fall off, and if he isn't careful, he could end the battle just like that. So Todoroki would ultimately be undone by the fact that Todoroki has no other counter to Deku, because his ice is clearly just incompatible when it comes to facing off against somebody like Deku. And so Todoroki gets angry, and with his right side, or whatever side it is that he uses to use his fire with, he would shoot an attack at Deku, which would actually end up hitting him, and it would hit Nue slightly, which would cause Nue to let out a screech, and Izuku would say, fine then, Nue, final attack! And Nue would shoot a gigantic lightning bolt at Todoroki, which would completely fry him, considering he had nowhere left to go on the arena, and with the conducting aspect of the ice, the attack would be multiplied 2 times fold, as Todoroki would completely get undone, and Deku would then be walking away with the dub. As Deku, while he's walking off, he turns to Bakugo, who would be his opponent in the finals, and he would say, don't take your loss too hard, Bakugo, as Bakugo grits his teeth and says, we'll see about that, but I've been saving a special move just for you. As Deku from here goes on to make his way towards the arena for the final fight, as Bakugo turns to him and says, it's not too late to call out now, Deku, considering that I'm gonna be the winner regardless. And Deku turns to Bakugo as he would say, well, winner or not, Bakugo, it doesn't matter to me. All that matters is that I'm gonna be showing that Saejima that I can be a hero, and showing him that he was right in picking me. I could not care less whether I beat you, don't beat you, because that's not what I'm here for. As you know, he said that not because that's true, but just because he knew that that would get under Bakugo's skin. And with getting under Bakugo's skin comes Bakugo fighting sloppily, comes Bakugo being clouded in his judgment, and that's exactly what Deku's waiting for. Deku was waiting to unveil this final ability right towards the end, and it was the perfect time. Deku ends up summoning a gigantic gorilla once more, as it would ask, why have you summoned me? With Deku stating that he needs him to teach that cocky brat a lesson. He thinks he's the best, but he needs to show him that he's not. And, you know, the ape turns to Deku as he would say, you called me for this? You were not even in life, in danger of losing your life. Call someone else. As he immediately retracts, and he would literally bro literally is such a powerful cursed spirit that he would literally unsummon himself. As Deku would just sit there and be like, alright then, plan B, as he summons his elephant summoning, and from here Bakugo begins jumping up into the air as, you know, he prepares to shoot a howitzer impact attack, which Deku was obviously waiting for. Right? And so what he would do is, while Bakugo was in the air, like flying around, Deku would use his elephant to pretty much shoot water at him from its nostrils, right? As boom, 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 water bullets would get shot at the direction of Bakugo. But since Bakugo was so far in the air and he's like just dodging, he would be able to dodge easily until finally he would have an opening and Bakugo would begin charging a howitzer impact as he flies towards the direction of Deku. And because Deku sees this, he realizes he needs to use a different ability to counter that. And so Deku would say, Black Flash, as he launches a thunderous blow at Bakugo, and both blows would clash as a gigantic orb would form in the middle of it, and they would both be rushing in at each other, punching, as it would look so similar to a Chidori Rasengan clash that it would be almost scary how similar it is. And ultimately, Bakugo would get sent flying, crashing into the arena, leaving an indented print of his body in the concrete, as Deku would then stand there victorious, with his arm sleeve being completely burned off from the impact of that blow. and Deku receiving fractures in his arm, leading him to ultimately be rushed to Recovery Girl, and Bakugo would as well, as about an hour later, after everybody else's, obviously, after everybody else's, after everybody else's sports festival events would be over, Deku would be awarded the winner of the Rookies of UA, and he would be the main person that everybody's going to be looking for great things from now on, as the very next arc that we're going to be starting is going to be the Stain arc, and the way that it begins would be with Izuku picking his hero name, which would be Megumi. And the reason that he picks the name Megumi is because we're going to be saying that Saijima's last name or middle name is Megumi, and Izuku wants to kind of give homage to Saijima for always of training him and being there for him when he was growing up and stuff like that. And Deku, he definitely doesn't want to forget Saijima, so he picks that as his hero name, Megumi. And so continuing on, when it comes to his internship opportunity, Izuku actually ends up deciding that who he wants to internship with is actually going to be Aizawa. During that fight that they had with the Nomu, Aizawa realized that Deku was definitely going to be good material to train. And so what would end up happening is Aizawa would end up taking Deku under his wing, showing him how to run an agency and teaching him how to, fight in a different combat style, and telling Deku about different things that villains will use to ultimately be sneaky, get the upper hand, how villains don't care, how villains will literally kill anybody around you just to win. They could not care less about anything. And, while telling Deku all of this, Izuku is just understanding this, taking it all in, writing some mental notes down in his head, as Deku is just he's actually learning a ton more than he thought that he was going to end up learning from Aizawa than he would have even expected. Aizawa was actually a much better mentor than you guys would think, and eventually Aizawa would end up telling Deku that there's somebody that he wants to go after, and that somebody is going to be the hero killer Stain. They go to Hosu City, seeing as Aizawa's records indicate that he's most likely going to still be there, and once they arrive, Aizawa, seeing all the Nomu attackings, would tell Deku to essentially go look for anybody that could potentially be in danger of the Nomus, as he rushes over towards one, and with the help of Endeavor would defeat it. As Deku rushing towards the streets would end up hearing the loud yell of Ida, who would have just gotten pierced in the back by a blade that Stain would have used in a non-vital area, mind you, and it will heal if he doesn't get stabbed again. As Aizawa looks to Ida and says, "Had you not have came against me with that vendetta, maybe you could have made it to the ripe age of killing. But since you want to come after me, and you're technically going to be a new pro hero as a pain in my side, I think it's best that we put you down." As Stain would then from here go to pretty much strike down at Ida, as Deku would say, "Nue, now!" And Nue would shoot a lightning bolt at the direction of Stain, which would send Stain flying back, and it would send him crashing into a trash can, as Stain angrily crawls out of it and would look towards the direction of Deku, who would have immediately grabbed Ida and the hero native and taken them to safety, as Izuku would think to himself that it's just him and Stain now. And Stain turns towards Deku as he would say, "So, you put the safety of those around you before fighting me. I can respect that, but you took away my kill, and I can't respect that." As from here, Stain goes on to look at the direction of Deku and rush at him with his tongue wavering in the wind in such a creepy fashion, right? As Stain looks at the direction of Deku, lunges up into the air, and with a quick slash would come down, as Deku would end up saying, "Nah, you played yourself, that's not gonna be working." As Izuku, using a small burst of black flash, would end up punching at the blade, which would end up pretty much repelling it and sending the blade crashing out of Stain's hand, as Stain would grab two kunais from his pockets and rush in at Deku, leading Deku to say, "It's about time I use Saijima's training." And from here they get into a very, very brief hand-to-hand combat exchange in which Deku begins to, be on the back foot for most of it, but he kind of ends up starting to understand Stain's fighting style, and judging by the fact that Ida told them Stain's ability while he was there, Izuku knows not to get stabbed or anything like that, right? And so what ends up happening is they would create some distance, and Izuku, using Nue in the air, would use him as support, as ultimately using Nue and himself fighting off against Stain, ultimately Stain would not be able to keep up and he would end up getting zapped by Nue, as suddenly Izuku would actually end up summoning another spirit, and this spirit would be a gigantic elephant, right? As it shoots a stream of water at the direction of Stain, and Stain from here would get sent back flying straight into the wall as it rushes in at him, and from here would begin to crash into Stain, leaving him completely unconscious, as Deku, looking at Stain, who would be on the ground, would think to himself that, that was a good battle. As Stain opens his eye, and Deku would think to himself, there's no way. From here, however, Deku would go on to get stabbed by Stain as he gets slashed up by his stomach, and Stain licks the blade, leading Deku to get completely paralyzed. And, since he's paralyzed, he can't really do anything, and so Stain would then look towards the direction of his cursed spirits, and Stain lunges up into the air as as the spirits would try to act, but seeing as Deku's restrained, I'm gonna be saying that they can't do anything to help him. And so what would pretty much end up happening is they end up dispersing, and Stain slashes at the air at Nue, but Nue disappears. And so what would end up happening is Izuku would then get ran upon by Stain, right? Stain lands, and then he looks at Deku and says, "It's about the end of the road, kid. You've been a pain in my side for a little too long." As he walks towards Deku slowly, and Deku, who can't move, would just think to himself that this is it. This is where he dies. He got lucky last time with Uraraka, but nobody's near him to save him. And so Izuku just looks down and would try to muster up his cursed energy, but what would pretty much end up happening is as Stain gets closer and closer, and as he lifts his blade up from his shadow, a gigantic tiger comes rushing out as it would lunge onto Stain, and it bites at the side of Stain's neck, sending him flying into the wall, as it then pounces on him and scratches Stain straight on the stomach, as it then goes on to pretty much just swipe at Stain's leg with such force that it breaks it, and Deku would just be watching on from the ground as this gigantic tiger just looks at Deku, and it nods, and then it just disappears, as Deku would say, "Nuka spirit? What? Since when did I have access to that?" And Izuku would then look towards the direction of his hands as he thinks to himself that was awesome. Bro got so, what's up with that? Is Zether giving me plot armor, Deku would think, as he's nah, that can't be it. And from here, Izuku would gather himself as he would then begin to walk towards the direction of Ida and Native, as he grabs them both, calling 911, and immediately after this, the police would end up coming in to restrain Stain, leading Stain not to be the reason that Dabi, Toga, Spinner end up joining the League of Villains. So the League of Villains takes a massive hit because of this, and so One For All is kind of left at a standstill point where he wonders to himself how exactly he's going to be handling this. Seeing as his old successor was clearly not worth saving, he decides that instead of that, he's going to be trying to just create another Kurigiri. Kurigiri's dispensable. He has the ability of teleportation already. He simply needs to give it to somebody else. And so, All For One would begin plotting, thinking to himself that there has to be another person who could properly be his successor. It is a shame that he lost a quirk decay, but there is somebody else on the market who may just have what it takes to be his true successor. And from here, what would end up happening is Deku would wake up in the hospital, seeing as he had a bunch of different injuries from the battle against Stain. And what would pretty much end up going down is that Deku would wake up to seeing the police dog tell him exactly what Deku was told in canon, leading him to going back to school, taking on a little race to see where they're all at ranking wise, and then the final exams would pop up, which I'm going to utterly be skipping straight to the part where Deku's going to be fighting off against All Might. Now, the battle would be something very much so interesting, just due to the fact that All Might can't exactly, All Might could definitely defeat Deku. That's just common knowledge, it's just facts. There's no way that All Might is not going to beat Deku in hand-to-hand combat, or against a spirit like Nue, or his gigantic elephant, or even his tiger. But there is one spirit that will most definitely be giving All Might a run for his money, and that spirit is this gigantic ape, which he can summon at any given time when he's facing off against a true threat. And because I think that he would most definitely see All Might as a real threat, then he's actually going to be giving him the respect that he deserves to actually face off against All Might. Now, seeing as he was able to clearly body the Nomu, this is going to be an easy fight for him, but seeing as Deku doesn't want him to kill All Might, he would tell him that telepathically. Seeing as they have a connection, Izuku would simply tell him to take him out of commission and not injure him on his side that or actually he doesn't know that, but he would actually just tell him not to take it too far and to just make sure that he doesn't that he holds him off long enough for him to cross the finish line alongside his partner, who's actually going to be Bakugo, right? Now, Bakugo would end up rushing into the battle and trying to fight off against All Might, but All Might quickly puts that boy to sleep, and Deku from here goes on to rush towards the direction of the exit, hoping that he gets there fast enough for All Might not to get too much punishment. And so All Might would start to get rushed at by the gorilla, as it would grab All Might by the arms, and in a fashion that All Might has almost never been grabbed before, bro would get manhandled and thrown through 4 different buildings as All Might looks at the direction of the gigantic gorilla in front of him, and he would just think to himself, what has he gotten into? Bro is literally terrified. This ape is gonna tear him limb from limb. All Might from here begins trying to use tactics such as wind attacks and smashes from distances to try to catch him off guard and defeat him and maybe land more blows than he does, but he would just be tanking these attacks, and ultimately All Might would end up just be toyed with until Izuku finally crosses the line and the gorilla would fade into nothingness as Izuku would smirk, and through the intercoms would be said, student team wins, as Izuku from here would get informed by the school about the forest training camp arc. And because of this, what would end up pretty much happening is that, the forest training camp arc would obviously start. Now, because this time around, All Might is actually going to be a little bit more injured. He is going to be missing it. And so what would pretty much end up going down this time is that during the forest training camp arc, instead of having villains such as Muscular and all that stuff going, we're going to be getting a new batch of villains that are going to be working under Overhaul, that are actually going to be there to quote unquote kill All Might, who they thought would be present there because there was no real reason for him not to be. But what would pretty much end up happening is that information would go to All Might that there's a student who is much more powerful than All Might himself. So All Might would All for One would definitely begin trying to prep for that student, which is obviously, we know him as Izuku Midoriya and or Megumi's reincarnation. And so what would pretty much end up happening is we're just going to skip straight to that day. Bombs would go off, and it would be definitely Overhaul who's at the center of everything, commanding his troops and using all of his minions that he would have in the Overhaul arc to ultimately end up getting the attentions of the heroes. The pro heroes would go over there to investigate, and this would leave the real big bads to actually get to the area where all the students are at. This would mean that Vlad King is going to be the only one who's there to protect the students, and because these villains would be there, the villain known as Kappa or something like that, the giant one with the mask, would rush in and instantly clobber him. It's a no diff fight for him. But after that happens, Izuku would simply be there watching all of this go down as a portal would open and out would step 2 men. One man with a plague mask and another one with a gigantic helmet that looks like Darth Vader, as Izuku would think to himself that those two don't look like they're here for anything good, and he would then turn towards the direction of the students as all of them come out and all of their quirks would be at the ready. Looking towards the direction of the Kappa, he would decide to use his summonings, as from here he begins using his cursed spirits. I know that probably that is irritating some of you guys that I'm saying summonings, but it's just honestly it's the same thing. It's a summoning, cursed spirit, same thing, right? But pretty much what would end up happening is that using his cursed spirits, he would end up pretty much summoning the ape and and summoning Nue, who he would use to actually rise above the air and stay afloat, as Overhaul would look towards the direction of Deku, tracking him with his eyes the whole time, and All for One would look at the direction of Deku as he would shoot a beam of energy at him, which would miss him obviously because he's using Nue, and what would pretty much end up happening is that the gigantic ape that Deku would have used would rush at Kappa, ultimately one-shotting him and then lunging at the direction of the villains, pretty much ripping them apart, as the students would rush in and, seeing that would kind of like be thrown off guard, so they try to ignore it, and they would be facing off against some of Overhaul's more weaker like minions, right? Ultimately leading to Deku landing in front of Overhaul and All for One and telling them to leave now, that like if they don't, they're gonna have to deal with the consequences. And All for One would laugh as he would say, "You kidding, kid? You want us to leave? When all of you are here for the taking, the next generation of heroes can be killed now. That entire problem could be taken care of. You're out of your mind if you think we're gonna pass this opportunity up." As Overhaul would grab a gun and shoot at the direction of Deku, as Deku would look at it and he would say, "That didn't even hurt," with an Overhaul saying, "It wasn't meant to hurt." And Overhaul from here would go on to shoot the beam at the direction of Deku, as what would pretty much end up happening is, Deku just like grabs it and he throws it on the ground, and Overhaul would smirk, saying, "No more quirk for you," expecting Izuku's cursed spirits to disappear, as they don't, with Deku saying, "Oh right, you were trying to destroy my quirk, weren't you?" As he would say, "Tough luck, buddy. I don't have one," as he rushes in at the direction of them, and Overhaul's smile would completely go away underneath his mask, as Deku, using a massive black flash, would smash at the ground and it would shatter. As from here, Overhaul and All for One would look at the direction of Deku, and it would be at this moment that, the heroes would have finally finished taking care of the other villains that were out there, the fodder ones, and would arrive to help out the students on the battlefield, as a gigantic battle would ensue. And what would pretty much end up happening is Nomus would be called out from a random black portal that would open, and what would go down after this is that Deku would simply look at the portal, as he is just kind of like scared, honestly. Deku would have a little bit of fear in his eyes, and what Deku would be thinking of next would pretty much be like how in the world he's going to defeat both of them, because All for One is definitely proving to be a bit more powerful than he gave him credit for. But ultimately his gigantic gorilla would end up jumping at the direction of All for One, as All for One puts up a barrier and it just smashes through it, just destroying it, grabbing All for One and throwing him off into a different direction, as spikes would come at the ape and it would actually end up piercing its side, sending the gorilla flying back. As from here, Overhaul would say, "Enough," as he grabs at the ground and a bunch of people just begin getting disintegrated. Heroes, hero students, and even Izuku's gorilla, which is going to be going by the name of Grodd. I'm pretty sure I already mentioned that. But Grodd would end up getting killed, and Izuku see that would be like, "Grodd's dead, my snake's dead, my wolves are dead. Like, what else are you gonna take from me, villains?" As from here, he would go on to look at the direction of the ground, saying that at this point, there's only one choice he can make, holding the ground, using all of his cursed energy, as he would say, "Summon," like he just says something cool, I can't think of anything, but a gigantic like griffin, I'm in between dragon or griffin, but I'm gonna be saying that a griffin, dragon just sounds way cooler, like this gigantic dragon beast with armor like you've never seen before appears out of Deku's shadow, as it massively engulfs all of the battlefield. And from here, it would turn to Deku, as it would think to itself that he summoned him. How much cursed energy does he have? Because to summon him, you need a ton. And Deku would be running on basically nothing, as this dragon just looks at the direction of, Overhaul and All for One, and with one fire breath would just eradicate them. You can't do anything because All for One would have tried to put up a barrier, but that breath would leave them in ashes, and the dragon would then just disappear as Deku looks at them and then passes out into unconsciousness, waking up in about 1 week due to cursed energy exertion, and his classmates would be around him. All Might would look at the direction of Deku and he would tell everybody to leave the room, as he would say, "Izuku Midoriya, you accomplished something that even I could not, and for that, I thank you. Hero Society thanks you. You've done a great service, and I'm certain that this will do you right, as he hands him a pro hero license, telling Izuku that what he did is something that not even the top 10 heroes can do, and that he's proud to announce that Izuku will be moving on from UA High, saying that he is going to be the youngest hero in all of history. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where What If Deku Was Megumi's Reincarnation is going to be ending. Rogue, I don't know if you're watching this, man, but if you are, let me know if I did this what if justice. I know I messed up in a couple of parts, but I think I nailed it right on the head. That said, though, ladies and gentlemen, definitely make sure to comment something down below letting me know what you guys thought, and if you guys want to see another Jujutsu Kaisen X My Hero Academia what if on the channel sometime soon. But with that all out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.